Hi, welcome to this episode of Prophecy for the Last Hour. My name is Liz McGee, and I have a teaching to share today. We're getting ready. The calendar's moving over into Passover, into quote-unquote Easter. And while I'm not going to do a whole, teaching on the feasts versus the pagan feasts and all that, I wanted to give a lot of insight into why it is so important to get back on Elohim's calendar of practicing the feast that he instituted for all generations and get out of practicing these quote-unquote pagan holidays, which are not instituted by our Father, our Yahweh Elohim, but by other quote-unquote Elohim. If you've been following any of my YouTube channel, I'm sort of in this teaching series. I've been really delving deep into understanding who are the heavenly beings. We are surrounded. We're in a very populated, I've said this a lot, our texts are full of information that we can know and we should have. And I always say our patriarchs, our ancients, our prophets, our sages had extremely knowledgeable understanding of the heavens and shale below the earth and on the earth, and that we've just kind of lost. And that's why we just don't have the big picture. So I want to delve into a little bit here on this. I want to talk really in how Yahweh, no, I don't mean that, I'm sorry, Yeshua, our Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, fits into this concept of an quote-unquote, I don't want to say angelic beings because I know right away people are going to he is an Elohim. He calls himself the son of Elohim. In the bigger picture, how that fits into the framework, the known Hebraic philosophical, theological framework, and what he was really saying that basically got him crucified as we come up into this season. So I'm going to read a couple of verses to set the stage. Psalm 25:4. Very familiar verse, says, the secret counsel of Adonai is for those who fear him. Now, Job, because what I want to do, I want to let your ear hear how many times this concept of secret, which is the word sod, S-O-D, which is the last, I've been through this a lot, of Jewish exegesis called pards, the secret counsel of the Lord, which he has revealed, and which is for our children and our children's children. But this is what I delve into. This is the meat of the word. This is what we need to get up to speed on. This is the information that is being released in this time, as Enoch says, as all the books, quote unquote, are being opened. But back to the text. So we have here the secret counsel of Adonai is for those who fear him. Job 15:8 says, have you ever been present when Elohim's counsel meets? Romans 11:34, in a similar concept, is who has known the mind of Adonai? Who has been his counselor? In other words, who has been, have you ever been in this secret counsel? Jeremiah 23:18 states, for who among them has stood in the counsel of Adonai to see and to hear his word? Who has paid attention to his word and listened? Job, I had said Job 15:8 says, have you listened in on the counsel of Elohim? Have you been a possessor of his wisdom? Psalm 89:5-8 says, in the assembly of the holy ones, angelic beings. And this is what we need to understand from our tradition, going all the way back to, the prophets. Sure, this is the point of these sages, these prophets, like Moses and Abraham, Isaiah. They were able, and this is the testament of them doing this, going into a realm where they could hear. They were present. Now, whether, like Paul says, in the body or out of the body, I don't know. I mean, really and truly, their minds were able to absorb, to commune, to take in on a certain level these assemblies, these councils of the Lord that are going on in heavenly places. Psalm 89, 5b says, in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can compare with Adonai? Who is like Elohim among the heavenly beings? In the council of the holy ones, Yahweh is greatly feared. He is more awesome than all who surround him. So it's very clear that we're painting a picture here of, and this is of elohims, because they are the council of the, they're called sons of Elohim. It says in Job 1, we'll go there right next. One day, the sons of Elohim, the sons of God, B'nai de Elohim, came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan was there. He showed up. He came with them. Job 2:1 says, again, there was a day when the sons of Elohim, but the B'nai de Elohim, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan appeared also. And so this is not like a made-up theology. This is not fantasy. It's not made up. This is in our text. And instead of intellectualizing it and, allegorizing it, let's just start to really try to understand truly what we can know and what is going on. Now, there's a verse further down. It says, "In the Lord," and Adonai said to Satan, Hasatan, "From where have you come?" And Hasatan answers Adonai, and he says, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." Now, a little more Hebraically savvy mind probably would read this, would understand going to and forth. There's this concept of height and breadth, length and depth. We have geography is very prominent in the talk of the angelic realms or the heavenly realms. We'll just use those words synonymously. So going to and fro and up and down. We have to understand that, Hasatan, what part of it is he has access to go all the way down to Sheol, to all up to the certain amount of number of heavens. I think, you can make a case up to the fifth heaven. So he does. He goes up and down. But he's not just, so he has access. And he is called one of the heavenly beings. And he is in, we have evidence that he is in these councils of the Holy One. Now, flipping this around, and these are known as the host of heaven. I have done a number of teaching this, trying to kind of flush out really what Yeshua did, what the whole kind of point of a Messiah ben Joseph, two comings of Messiah. Why did he have to do that? Why couldn't he just come once, in great path? Even the Jews went once, just in great pageantry and power, and lift the whole skies. Everybody can see him. I mean, let's just do this thing up big. But he didn't. He came once as a human being, he took on flesh. So we have to understand why. What was important to the storyline that he had to do this? So there is a concept of, let me see just where I want to go next with this. That Michael the Archangel, all right, so I have fleshed this out. And there is a understanding, if you get into heavens, that there is visible realms, there's invisible realms. Now this really shouldn't be too much rocket science. I mean, if you look up and you see what our texts are constantly referring to, the sun, moon, and the stars, and we look up and we see, whoa, sun, moon, and stars. All right. But most people even now, and then we can see. So there is visible manifestations of quote unquote the heavens. Birds, it's many times texts say fly in the heavens. That's the first, second, and third heaven. You can see them. So there are physical manifestations in these heavens that we can see. But at a certain point, it drops off. We can't see some of these invisible realms. That's very clear in the text. But one of the major things that is going on in the Old Testament, and I have studied a lot into the angelic orders. I have you to the, so if you're interested, listen to the whole playlist, because you'll really get a lot of information. I think some very unique understandings and what we can know. I mean, I have listed over 12 angelic orders, ranks, that are placed in the different heavens, from sages, prophets, on both sides, the New Testament and the Old Testament. This is a very large topic that is covered a lot in our text. This is nothing, it's just really so much of this information in the last 200 years. Most of the church, most of Western Christianity has lost all of this kind of understanding. But we got to get up to speed fast because these hosts of heaven, they're not done with us yet. So I want to go on the flip side and say that one category was called the elohims, the gods. There are gods. We know we have a father God, Yahweh Elohim, but there are also texts where that there are these lesser gods that are always in these divine councils. This is what you'll see. In the council of the holy ones, the divine beings who are the heavenly beings. This is all over the Dead Sea Scrolls literature. There's a lot of information. They were very savvy on all of this understanding. When Yeshua shows up, this is the thing. Let me read this quote. He comes as a human being. But see, part of the reason is because as Satan's temptation of Yeshua shows, Hasatan understood that the Messiah's goal in becoming human was to qualify himself to rule over the nations and not just Israel. The devil tried to get Yeshua to take the easy path by attaining this authority by worshiping him. Remember, if you bow down and worship me, because I have these kingdoms, I will give you all the kingdoms. Okay, I'll just give them to you if you'll worship me. We can keep this thing kosher. What is going on is, see, so I have to understand, in Enoch, there was this concept that this is why he always says, you always have this dichotomy between the God of Israel and the gods, plural, of the 70 nations. And I try to establish this is very well established in the Old Testament, this concept. There weren't gods. They're called gods over the nations, and the people were given over to them and told, these are your gods. Now, again, you get into the concept of Android. 70 is a number, it's a very prophetic number, but it's always about hierarchy. There are 70 chiefs, tons under them. This is not like there's only 7. So, don't get, a lot of these number things have great prophetic significance to them. But in these concepts of these Elohims, they're called the Mazarah. This is in the Old Testament. What they're saying. This is why the sun and the moon and the stars are so important, because they were given authority. These are called the chiefs, the princes, the tutelary angels. They were called the shepherds. They're called the craftsmen. Oh my gosh, I have so many designations, so many different titles. But what it's telling you is that the nations had their gods. And at one point, when we started this thing, really, with Adam, it's always been, Adam's children worshipped Yahweh Elohim. Was the no-brainer. With Cain, you had a knowledge and an understanding that there were other players in this. And you did start a whole new system of worshiping. This is and then you get into the fallen angels. See, a lot of what we're coming to understand today, packing Genesis 6, unpacking the pre-flood world and the world of Nimrod, the world up to Abraham, so to speak. The world really up to David, when he really forcibly just was able to decimate a lot of these remnant progeny of these Elohims. Okay, so that's a huge part of the storyline. I expect most of my listeners are up to speed on that. I'm not going to go into that. Genesis, that is a real phenomena. It's all over the text. We can't write it out. It's true. So we can understand now that in a slow progression, but it cannot be understood that the stars were starting to be worshipped in the days of Enosh. The foundations of star worship was beginning, because these Elohims were so powerful and present, and I believe there was much more interfacing, much more interaction in the different heavens. Maybe the atmosphere wasn't as thick. Maybe they just literally had more freedom to roam, so to speak. And you have all these mythologies of so much interaction between, quote unquote, the gods and the humans, and even entities under the earth. I've been through this, so it's a really, but I don't want to digress too much. So we understand that one of the traps for early human Adamites was to begin to mistakenly believe that because Elohim is far beyond the vanities or the heaven, this realm of the sun, the moon, and the stars, which were created. And let me tell you, this is why you get this whole mythology. The Greeks carried it with Kronos, who is the father of time, and Uranus, who is, and then the guys like Earth. You really get into, they're very clear that they are talking about interactions between highly powerful, what are called principalities, powers, entities, heavenly beings, literal beings that have tremendous power and influence that has been delegated to them by their creator. Okay. We're created beings, they're created beings. But it was felt that it would be better to serve the underling stars, these quote unquote lesser principalities, lesser powers, who seem to have a more immediate influence. And it became a problem. So that in time, many Adamites, this is the whole point, that the principle of the notion of monotheism was lost. You get into polytheism, that all of a sudden now these 70 gods, these whole tiers of ruling angelic orders were, well, that's who the gods are. That's who we'll worship. And they were more than happy to institute rites, practices, rituals, this whole thing of keeping themselves as the preeminent ones. So you have this whole backdrop that's been building, and there were some really tremendous, that's why the flood happened. Noah, this is the whole point. There were so many runaway angels causing such havoc in the cosmos. He actually literally had to destroy the first world that came right out with Adam, and created it anew under Noah. So this is a real present problem. But Yeshua, now getting back to him, what is it that he had to do? What was the strategy the Father had to do in order to make him a human being, that he had to come in? How was he able? Because at the point he undercut them in their authority. See, this is the whole story of the gospel. He came, he undercut their authority. He says he made a show of them openly. He robbed them of their people. So anyone now who in the nations, this is the whole point, who wants to change their kingdom, their God, can. All right? This is a very important principle, and it tends to make everything make sense. And we're still in that season, even though the door is going to close pretty soon. If you haven't made a determination yet of who your Elohim is, you better do it fast. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let me just talk. So the worship of these heavenly hosts had become a real problem. Israel was tremendously affected by this. They had great seasons where they would get caught into worshiping as the nations were. All right. And I have to tell you, this is really deep. This is not, as I delve into, this is where a lot of these ideas of sorcery, of idolatry. See, you are talking, let me put it this way, a lot of these, and I'll say these Elohims reign in what is known in an astral plane. These are called astral deities. This is another phraseology that you'll see the ancients use, okay? They're not the high Elohim. They are not in the throne room, all right? But they are sort of they're called, the mid-level management that was, just strutting around and getting a little too big for their britches, okay? And there was great warfare going on, all right? And this is a lot of the stories of the mythologies, and it is really true. We're the ones who have to re-educate our minds, our modern minds, to get back in league with the true storyline. If you want to have sight, eyes to see and ears to hear what is really going on. So let me give some quotes here. All over your Old Testament, Deuteronomy 4:19, it talks about, beware, do not lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them. Those which the Lord your Elohim has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. In other words, Israel's Elohim was and they had a prince. All right, let me put it this way too. This is what we're going to get to Mashiach, because there's a huge principle involved. You always have a container, and then you have what fills the container. I have a physical body, right? But I've been through this many times. I have a whole soul life and a whole spiritual life that is behind the scenes, operating this little physical body, okay? It works the same way for everything. These are called the garments. I have a physical garment on, so to speak, physicality. Well, it's the same way. The sun, the moon, the stars, these things, these are really their garments, their vessels, their bodies, their the visible parts of them. All right. And as you get apart, it's quite powerful. I mean, they have what is known as mazal. This is the ancient word, influence. Make no mistake about it. There was a great reason why the ancient, or, you know, pagan would worship and sacrifice and all this to appease their gods. You better believe it. These these have influence. They create our crops. I mean, our seasons and our crops. They warm the earth. They bring the dew and the rain and the clouds. I mean, this is a real phenomenon. They are, quote unquote, chiefs and princes, and they have authority. All right. And this whole relationship started to develop between the people on earth and these, quote unquote, elohims in the heavens. Deuteronomy 12:17 says that do not transgress my covenant and go to serve the other elohims and worship them, whether the sun, the moon, the stars, or any host in heaven, which I have forbidden. Again, Jeremiah 19:13 says, and the houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah will be defiled, all the houses upon whose roofs offerings have been made to the whole host of heaven, and libations have been poured out to the other Elohims. Israel got caught up in, you know, we know the story of the northern kingdom. They got so caught up in this idolatry, this worship, they totally lost their connection with the high Elohim, with who had really fathered them and covenanted with them and married them, to the point where they had literally become, like he says, worthless. If you want to serve these other, go fine, go, have at it. And he just kicks them off the land, disperses them. And, you know, it's just a huge story. That's another whole group of teachings. But in 2 Chronicles 33:3, it talks about how Manasseh, he rebuilt the shrines that his father Hezekiah had demolished. It was a huge problem. He erected altars to the Baals. The Baals, these are other gods, other lords, other chieftains. And he made sacred posts. He bowed down to all the hosts of heaven and worshiped them. But see, I guess in our modern part, we have to understand this is something, these spheres, these heavenly entities have intelligence. They have will. They are beings. See, this is why it says that Yeshua now has the name above all other beings. See, this is the part that we have to retool our mind to understand, all right? These people weren't confused. We're the ones that are confused. All right. Okay. Jeremiah 8:2, a couple more. It says they spread before the sun, the moon, and the host of heaven, which they have loved and served, which they have gone after, and which they have sought and worshipped. So it's a real problem in Nehemiah 9:6. It says, you have made heaven, the heavens of heavens, and all their hosts, the seas and all that is in them. And you preserve them, and the host of heaven worships you. Now, see this thing. You have two groups on the planet. Those who truly have keeping it an understanding that these are just the servants of Elohim, and those who literally are displacing the high Elohim, our Father, with these hosts of heaven. So in scripture, one of the signs of a true prophet, and now this is the understanding, was being shown a vision of one of his divine council meetings. Because like I said, Hasatan was called to a meeting. You know, some of them, and this is the point where we're going to judge angels. This gets into the whole idea of the gods of the nations. Some were better than, when the whole thing gets wrapped up in the judgment of these angels comes, and we get to, and everything gets played back, and we are part of this process of judging angels. Yahweh's justice is going to shown to be totally perfect, but seers and prophets, this is the point, they were those who had not only stood in a council meeting, and proclaimed oh, I lost my other half of this. And they were able to proclaim who were false prophets and deceivers. Because, see, a true prophet was in the true counsel of the Lord. He was there. He knew what had been decreed that was going to happen to Babylon. Okay? This is the other thing. I mean, see, when it's in the Maseroth, you understand that this whole thing is really just the aeons. It's just it's time. It's the whole progression of events of the 6,000 to 8,000 years that it's taking to wrap this up and restore everything back to its original from the fall. And the whole, they knew story beginning to end because it's up. This is their job. They're to progress through all the different eons, epics, all the different, Daniel put the beast, the different kingdoms. So it's not news to them. But what it is a true prophet who will have access, be brought into the secret counsel of the Lord to know the secret things of Yahweh, will be able to say absolutely, no, Babylon is coming to get you and you're going down. What he proclaimed. So this is what we need today. Oh my gosh. With all the confusion that's coming out of Babel. Anyways, so they're setting up those. Now, getting into Yeshua, back to this and to my statement that said, because remember it says that he made a show of them, like it says that if Hasatan had known, how does it go? He never would have crucified. If he'd known the plan truly and how it was going to trump him, he never would have crucified the Lord of Glory, because it was the trump card. It was able to totally take all of the peoples out from under him that he had enslaved in his whole Babylonian religious system, which Babylon is a code word for the demonic orders that are the gods of this world who are ruling us down here in first, second, and third heavens. They've got us kind of in this lockdown called Prison Planet. I mean, this is all coming out now. So, but on the, and this is, and I wanted to say, but I have also, there's two sides to this coin, all right? And this is all through Hebraic studies, because I read deeply into the mysteries, which is kept in the Zohar, which is kept in what is called the oral tradition, which is real, which I'll do more shows. I have a great video, actually I should put on my channel for people to see on this. But the point is, there is the influence of the stars upon human life. The concept of mazal, or constellations, is essentially a physical concept. There is real, we know this, the moon really does influence the tides. I mean, a secular science will tell you, nobody's making that up. There is definitely a relationship. But part of, again, the whole point of this is that these are just his deputies. They are just supposed to be there to make sure the whole cosmos keeps running like clockwork. So we have our, we can have our seasons of bounty, and you have times of seasons of plenty and seasons of famine. Gets really deep into, some of these have, the authority to bring famine and chastisement. Some of these hosts, see, this is what's, they war, they have authority to, it says like Babylon was given authority, Rome, these are given authority to chastise people groups who get so far out of line, or even Yahweh's people who just refuse to obey, to live peaceably, to be a Torah keeping, God honoring group of people. But the point is that they are channels through which spiritual forces flow down to the world. So like I said, there's two sides. You can look at it from the point of view, and I love to read some of the sages on this, because there is great physics in this. Especially in this day of quantum physics, and as we're beginning to understand the inner space. We call it the kingdom of heaven is within us, this whole world of inner space, We thought we're just discovering this stuff. No, people, your ancients, your Hebrew sages have known this from Adam, and it's been kept down in the righteous line. But we need to get up to speed on this. But the point is that, and this gets into the whole thing of astrology, that there is definitely influence. Oh, I wonder if I have it here, a quote here, because it's important to understand something. This talking about mazal. Even though these elohims have authority to influence nature, They have authority, and the way it's all configured to influence our soul life to the point where, people are born under a mazal, this concept, your astrological birthday. Well, there is certain truths in this, all right? You don't, like anything can be taken too far, but there is certain wirings that comes from being born under certain kind of constellational things. There is energy, because we now know that everything is energy, is vibration. So why wouldn't the vibrations in ourselves, molecularly, biologically, chemically, influence us? But these can all be, and this is what constantly is over and over in the prophets, in our text, is like, look at, I know I had to make a group of elohims that run the world, but ultimately I run it behind the scenes, and I, Elohim, your Elohim, can change your mazal through Torah, through me. I can do what no one else can do. And see, this is such interest. This concept is what is, whether you're a king, whether you're a prophet, or whether you're just Hannah praying that her mazal, her childlessness, would be alleviated through a flow and emanate an influence higher than the mazal. See, okay, so what I want to say is there is the visible and the invisible. There are huge spiritual forces at work in our cosmos. Now, again, back to Yeshua. One of the biggest problems here is this, and it's attested in so many places, but that the angels, these group of Elohims, these 70 shepherds, were mismanaging the world. Since each of them desired the sovereignty and the worship and the authority, Yeshua had come to set manners right. See, someone had to save the nations from the influence of these Elohims. Believe me, they're way stronger than you and me. If you don't have, somebody with more power on your back, you're never going to get out from under the influence. And this is really the whole story of the Exodus, and and Pharaoh and everything. Yahweh came, he proved in front of the whole world, a display of his splendor, that he is stronger, bigger, better, badder, smarter, whatever, than all of those gods of Egypt, or, the gods of whatever. And so Yeshua came, and he descended, he transformed himself into a human being, and he was being made lower than these powers and these authorities. All right, this is such a cagey little strategy. All right, so one of the things we have to understand now, Yahweh, there's a verse I believe in Colossians 2:8. Well, all right, so let me just say this one more time while I'm on this, is understanding, well, there's plenty of, and there's really more powerful angelic Elohims that are in relationship with Yahweh. We do have, these runaway demonic entities. And again, back to this concept that Paul, understanding the New Testament, understanding Paul and what he is saying, and how his understanding, he's a Jew, he's a Pharisee of Pharisees. If he doesn't understand his own text, and what the storyline is, then there's no hope, all right? He studied deeply after his conversion into the Essene texts. This is the thing. He was knocked off his high horse, and he was like, Paul, you don't get it. The Father's saying, you think you're working for me, you're totally working against me, you're on the wrong page. And Paul goes to, it says in text, he goes to Arabia, goes to the desert. I believe he goes to this place, to Arabia, Mount Sinai. There's a tradition there, like I was saying, where a real prophet, a real sage, someone who will get to a place of being in the secret counsels of the Lord. If you can't get there, if your revelation does not come from that level of, if you don't get invited to the meeting, you really don't have anything to say. Paul, when he came back and he said, look, I didn't get my doctrine from any man. Nobody's taught me this. I got it by revelation of Yeshua HaMashiach. What he's saying is, I went and hitobetet, which is a whole Hebraic phraseology, being in isolation, being alone, being like Moses on the mountain 40 days in direct dialogue and getting direct revelation, being in the throne, getting the secret counsel about for the next wave. He got a revelation, he calls it a mystery, of how this was going to go forward for the Gentiles and what had just happened and the ramifications of it. And he talks about how that in Galatians 4:2, what he is talking about, how we were once subject, and he's talking to Gentiles. Always remember this. Get your audience straight, because that has everything to do with context. He's saying, look, he is subject. The Gentiles were subject to guardians and trustees until the date set by the Father. These guardians and trustees, again, and I have been through this, are these elohims, these sun, moon, and stars, these chieftains, these whatever you want to call them, these 70 shepherds, these that have authority over the nations. He said, you were once enslaved to them when we were children, in other words, and children, we couldn't take, we just had to take it. A child parentization, the child is much stronger, has much more authority, and I guess authority at their disposal. And we're slaves to the and the correct translation is to the elemental spirits of the universe, which is the elemental forces of the world, which is basically the same thing as saying these are the spiritual powers of this world. These are the angelic, the elohims ruling in the heavens, the mid-level management. All right, that's exactly what he is. The translations have gotten so out of hoil, it's crazy. But we were brought out from under them. We once were children and slaves to them, but we no longer are, because and he says, make sure, and he's always telling his audience, these Gentiles, make sure that nobody takes you captive again, that you don't fall back into their trap through philosophy or empty worldviews that are, they're mazal, their thing, and that you fall back into this concept to becoming again under the power of the spiritual powers of the world rather than under Christ. All right, you've been free. He who the Son sets free is free indeed. It's my message here, Passover. Get free. Be on Yahweh's page when he comes. All right, for he is, now Yeshua, and it goes on to say in Colossians 2:8, no one takes, in verse 9, for in him, in Yeshua, all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form. This is the point. Even though he might have looked like a lowly servant, and this is what we know, he had inside of himself, his soul and his spirit was completely full of, like, his mother and his father, his heavenly mother, heavenly father. One way of saying it, he was full of the Godhead. He is the head over all rule, kingly or magisterial, in all authority of other spiritual powers. In other words, so he came and he humbled himself as this man, even though he knew he was the highest Elohim, the highest son of Elohim amongst these Elohims. All right, now let me explain this. One of the concepts is, it says that he fills all in all. Now, this is my opinion. I have read it pretty much in a lot of the sages, the commentaries, the understandings. It's in our text, but it's this concept, this sort of, and I have to say, unless you really get deep into the deeper levels of understanding, you're never going to figure out this relationship with the Godhead, with the seven spirits of Elohim. What are all the names of Yahweh? It's very confusing unless you can really get into it and get the Hebraic understanding of Adam Cademan, of the body of Yeshua. All right, the macrocosm. All right, this whole thing, from the highest heavens all the way down to the deepest pit. All right, but when Yeshua fills all in all, when he is in any dimension, let me put it this way, when he is in the high heavens, he's sitting on the right hand of the Father. There's nobody else. He says, and the Father says, look, at everything I have is yours. I've given it to you. And the Father says, everything that the Father has is mine. Okay, so they're like this up there, right? There is no other name above his. There's no other Elohim. There's nobody else. His name trumps them all. And in authority situations, like if you're in a war and a general, I mean, if the general gives the order, you better jump, really. But all the way down in the heavens, he takes on a persona. He is the premier persona, so to speak, because he fills all in all. It's a concept. So when you get down into these elohims, who do you think Yeshua is? And this is what's in the text. He is Michael. When he wants to be an angel in this dimension, when he goes into the secret council, now he doesn't go in, he doesn't strut in as the high Yahweh Elohim, Father Creator up there. He comes in as Michael the Archangel amongst all the other ones. And he is the angel over Israel. He is the ruler, the chieftain. And this is what the texts have told us. All right, that Michael is the prince over Israel. He is the chief prince. This is very much this is nothing I'm telling you, Christian. You've never been taught this, and I'm sorry. And this is why sometimes I have to preface myself, and I wonder, oh my gosh, why do I say some of this stuff? Because, I know people, but stick with me. All right. So let me go into fleshing this out a little more, because this really gets into the whole point of why the Jews were so mad at him and why they would go all the way to crucify him. He says he came to his own, and his own crucified him, basically. But it was all part of the plan, but whatever. According to the Jews' own words, they understood that Yeshua was claiming to be an Elohim, one of the divine sons of God. Because he says this. He says, I am the son of the Father. I am a son. I am the son of God. And not just any son of God, all right? He is the son of God. In other words, he is the chief of this realm, all right? Now, follow me with this, because again, you've got to understand something. Everything has a garment, a container, and then all of the flux, all of the spiritual, everything that fills it is in it. So this is the point of the matter. He is full. No one is demoting Yahweh or Yeshua. It's just putting it all into context in a bigger picture, sort of a behind the scenes bigger picture. According to the Jews' own word, Yeshua's, and if you think I'm crazy, just let me give you a couple quotes here. Okay, so this is from John Calvin, commentary on the book of the prophet Daniel. So Calvin says, some think the word Michael represents Christ, and I do not object to this opinion. John Calvin, clearly enough, if all angels keep watch over the faithful and elect, still Christ holds the first rank among them, because he is their head. Remember, he is one of his name is Adonai Sabaoth, head of the armies. He is the chief over all the armies, the angelic orders of the Lord. Because he is their head and uses their ministry and their assistance to defend his people. This is the whole point. So he understands this. Michael is the chief prince. This is Yeshua and this one is from John Gill in his exposition on the Bible. He's a very famous Bible expositor, and he says, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, called in the New Testament an archangel, the prince of angels, the head of all principalities and powers. And there is no other than Christ, the Son of God. See, when you understand this, here is, it's really crazy, because I just got a flash in why is a sacrificial lamb, and then taking his blood and putting it on the throne room in heaven as a sacrifice. It's just it's just one huge circular drama that is played out to the T. Another one, let me give you one more here. It says that as Satan's temptation of Yeshua, obviously Satan understood that the Messiah's goal in becoming human was to qualify to rule over nations and not just Israel, because this is the point. Someone had to free the nations from the authority, the influence, the mazal, the captivity of these Elohim. All right. And that was what Yeshua did. He said, here I am, Father. I will, in heaven, the Lamb, who will go, who will do this thing, and he says, here's the Lamb from before the foundations of the world. So you have to understand, when you get into, there's a whole backdrop. Yes, he might be Michael ahead of the armies, but it's very clear that he comes, his root system, his street goes way back and way up. See, this is what it, so anyway, so in Hebrews, let's give some scriptural what am I going to say? Scriptural representation for this. See, Yeshua says, and again, getting back to how Satan had figured this out, and he said that the devil took him, Yeshua, up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, and said to him, I will give you all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. And in 1 John, it says, and we know that we are from God, and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. See, this is the point. Hasatan had gotten, through the fall, dominion. He was the head angel and job over the lower heavens and these lower elohims. Even though, and he was willing to give all that authority to Yeshua. And Yeshua said, no, thank you, obviously. I am going to do what I came to do. And now this explains a lot, and especially if you could read deep into the Dead Sea Scrolls and into the understanding they have with the angelic record, how Yeshua, see, a great soul like how do I even say this? He just knew who he was. He wasn't playing around. If you read a lot of the extra biblical texts, some of them talk about his childhood and different things. It's unfortunate we just don't get this in our quote 66 canon. We don't understand. Here is somebody, he knew who he was. He didn't have a problem. He didn't spend trying to figure this out. He came fully locked and loaded on a mission. According to the Jews' own words, they understood that Yeshua was claiming to be an Elohim, one of the divine sons of Elohim. I told you, in the secret council. All right, he is Lord Sabaoth. He is the king, the chief of all the angelic realms, and we know that this is Michael, the chief prince. All right, Yeshua's specific reply in John 10:33 to their charge of blasphemy, and they're all saying, how can you call yourself the son of Elohim? What gives you the authority to do that? And he's basically saying, well, look at the works I do, you can do anything like that, buddy. I mean, he kind of tries a couple of ways to kind of get them to see, to like, look at something's going on here. He replies to their charge of blasphemy by quoting from Psalm 82:6, which I quoted earlier, which is a reference to those ruling angels on the divine council who were called sons of Elohim, the B'nai De Elohim in the Old Testament. Then Yeshua asked the Jews, he says, why do you say I'm blaspheming? Just because I proclaim myself to be a son of Elohim. And when the Father himself in Scripture calls the members of the divine council Elohims, what do you get? Read your text. That's what it says. He's saying, then it says in John 19:6, therefore, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out saying, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate was like, you take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. And then the Jews answered and says, we have a law, according to our law he ought to die, because he made himself the son of Elohim, he himself a son of Elohim he made. In other words, like he just decided one day to wake up and proclaim, I'm the great Elohim, I'm the great B'nai De Elohim, the son of Elohim. And he's like, no, it doesn't work that way. That's not what I'm doing. I have, the works testify. If you can't see it for the works or from my character of holiness and things, but they refused. So Jesus answered, he goes, many good works I have shown you from my Father. For which of these works do you stone me? The Jews answered him saying, for a good work, we don't stone you. But for blasphemy, because you being a man, make yourself Elohim or a Elohim. Jesus said, is it not written in your law, I said you are gods. This is telling it again in John in another place. He says, is it not written in your law, if he called those elohims, to whom the word of God came, and scripture cannot be broken, why do you say of him whom the Father has sanctified and sent into the world, that I am not, you are blaspheming. He says, you are blaspheming because I said I am the son of Elohim and you don't believe me. See, there was, it was all prophesied that the Son of God, that a Messiah was going to come. This gets into a lot of interesting, when you read the text, there's a lot of spin, but let me give you a couple more quotes here. How this concept of, because he's going to come back. Now let's go back to the book of Revelation. Let's go to what we understand about the end of the age, when he comes back as Messiah ben David. And he does come back as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. All right. And he does come back with all rule and authority and with all of his angelic hosts to literally take the kingdom that now is his, and all of the people who have now, through his work, through his human, because see, like can only redeem like. So him being a human, dying and offering his blood as a sacrifice for the sins of the people, especially of the nations, he had all legal authority now in the whole court of heaven among these Elohims to claim all of these people, to redeem them and to give them an inheritance for what he had. He says, the Father has given it to me, and what I have, I give to you. And this is it. You can now enter into the heaven, to a higher kingdom. Now my Father can become your Father, and you do not longer have to be under the influence and these intimidating, terrorizing Elohims are no longer your gods, and I will fight for you. That's what he was. Elohim was always Yeshua, or even this. He is now in the Old Testament is the angel of the Lord. See, there's a lot of there's so much we don't pick up on. Like the evangelical Christian mind is so in kindergarten. I'm sorry I have to say, because there's so many nuances to this that we just don't understand. The angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. This is Michael. This is our Yeshua. It's not a million different. He's one, but he is incarnating himself in many different ways and forms. That's what 2 Peter says, in many ways and in various forms. Elohim has been redeeming the world through his servant, and this is the branch. There's just so many, it all really does come together on so many deep levels. But the point is, this is really important to understand, especially as we end the age, especially as, let me just read, I just want to end with something, but I wanted to say a couple more verses here in Hebrews about the Son, it says. And again, it says, your throne, O Elohim, your throne, we're talking to the Son, will last forever and ever. The righteousness will be the scepter of and righteousness will be the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness, you have hated wickedness. Therefore, Elohim, your Elohim. So in other words, the Son has a Father, has a God, okay? There's always hierarchy. The God of you has set you above your companions. Again, that's another way of saying your peers, all those other Elohims. You have the place of preeminence. He has anointed you with the oil of joy. Now, this was all foreknown from the foundations of the world. The higher, see, this is why the highest heavens knew this, understood this. So the highest levels, this level again of mid-management, it's the mid-management level of this thing is what is really, and see, this is where he says, we're going to replace, is that we're going to shine like lights in the firmament. This is, again, I've said this before, we are really the true, let me put this, is the righteous Zadik, the elect at the end, whatever you want to call them, will replace all of these heavenly, these Elohims that are going to get totally taken out, thrown down, disposed of, whatever. I won't go into that whole quote unquote theology right now, but and and we will be their replacements in the new heaven and the new earth. And in this new heaven and new earth, there won't be any need for, quote unquote, a sun, a moon, and a star, all these things, because he, the one, the Father and the Son will be the light. There won't be any need for any of this stuff anymore. We will all be in complete harmony again. This is the whole concept too of the Sabbath rest. There will be no negative energy things we got to deal with, so to speak. Everything will be at rest. Everyone will be focused on the light. Again, everything will be channeled perfectly through the one light from the Father through the Son and on out. I mean, the whole thing fits. It's very beautiful. That's why at this Passover time, I encourage you really just need to study this stuff. Study the feasts of Israel. These are our feasts. This is what we need to be practicing at the end of the age. The dress rehearsals, because couple of them still have to get fulfilled. And stop practicing like the pagans. And so on that admonition, I want to say shalom. And I know I had one more thought in my head and I can't. Okay, it's at the end of the age. See, it's so important we understand that our Yeshua, he is the chief over all the angelic, as the world will go into chaos, because I'll tell you those, fallen angels, they're not going to go down without a fight. This is what your Bible's telling you, okay? But we have our Elohim, our Yeshua, with the Father back up behind him. It's a no contest. So it says in Isaiah again, when it talks about all this, he says, tell the righteous it will be well with them. They will, they will eat the fruit of their deeds. Okay. But tell the wicked it's going to be woe with them. So come out from them, my people, because unfortunately the people that still are under the mazal of these Elohims are going to come into their judgment. You don't want that to happen. So the door is still open. No Gentile or unsaved individual comes unto the Father except through Yeshua HaMashiach. He is the chief. And so on that note, I do want to say shalom and blessings.